different times for reading the Megillah, whether you're an open city or a walled city. If you're an open city, you read it on the, which day? 14th. And a walled city, you read it on the, okay, thank God. They know it. They learned something, okay? It wasn't in vain.
Numbers, if any more than two numbers, don't.
That's it. Okay, so if we can pick it up, if you see, we're on 2b, page 2b, and we're going to be, it says cities which have walled since the days of Joshua son of Nun. It's on the left column, halfway down. If you want to follow along in the Hebrew, it's going to be about 15 lines down. So he says, walled cities. What do you mean a walled city? Yeshua ben Nun, from the days of Joshua. Also we read on the 15th. This is a quote from the Mishnah. Okay? So the Gemara asks, how do you know this? I mean, the Mishnah states a fact. We want to know, what is the source? Why? We know that the Purim is on the 14th. Why do we read on walled cities on the 15th? Omar Rava. So Rava says, the Omar Kra, it's stated in the verse, Al Kain, therefore, that means after everything is said and done, Ha-Yehudim, Jews, Ha-Prozim, that are spread around of the villages, Ha-Yoshrim Ba'arei Ha-Prozis, that dwell in unwalled city, okay? So he says, from there you learn, since he specifies that there are Jews living in unwalled cities, why does he have to specify? Let him just say, Al Kain HaYehudim, therefore Jews should read. No. But the Megillah, writes, therefore Jews that lived in unwalled cities, so the Meprozim, so since we know, now this is Talmudic logic, since we know that unwalled cities, Ba'arba Asar, read it on the 14th of the day, because that's what it said there, Al Kina Yehudim HaProzim, HaYoshim Ba'arei HaProzis, Karim, the 14th, Mukafim, therefore walled cities, when would they read it? B'chamisha Asar, on the 15th. So he learns it out logically. Since there's a verse that tells us in the Megillah that all of the people that lived in unwalled cities read it on the 14th, therefore people in a walled city would read it on the 15th. You think the Mishnah is going to let him go with, you think the Gemara is going to let him go with just some simple statement like this? He just forget about it. The Ema, let us say, no, you're going to translate that verse. Now remember, every time the Talmud is going to bring a proof from a verse, whether it's in the first books of Moses or the prophets or the scriptures, wherever it comes, the verse is there specifically to include and also to exclude. Okay, every verse comes to include a certain set and to exclude a different set. Otherwise, we wouldn't need a verse. Universally, we know that this is true. The fact that in the Megillah it says those Jews that lived in unwalled cities, so they specifically indicated and stressed unwalled cities, comes to tell us what? That there's got to be a differentiation. There has to be some difference between the unwalled cities and the walled cities, right? Otherwise, he would just say the word Al Kain HaYehudim. Therefore, Jews read on the 14th. Okay. So that's just a general statement. But now we come to tell us, okay, we know that there's a difference and there's between walled and unwalled cities, and we know that in the Megillah tells us that unwalled cities read it on the 14th, but it doesn't specify walled cities. The Ema, let us say, Prozim, those unwalled cities, Barba Asar, read it on the 14th. Mukafim, those that are walled, Klalu klaloi. No. They don't read it at all. There's no reading whatsoever in a walled city. Who says they read it in general? We take for granted that a walled city has a different time. Maybe they don't read it. Maybe it was only the Jews that lived in unwalled cities. That's when they watch them. That's who reads the Megillah.
Was it because, well, first of all, it could have come on tape delay right on satellite if they weren't in a walled city, right?
Could have. Yes.
Was it because the way information traveled that they made the distinction of the walled city? It took longer to get the word.
Well, the difference was that because in Shushan itself, see, we're only right now in the middle of the thought. It'll come to a point where they're going to say the reason why there's a difference is because in Shushan itself there was one extra day of war. See, the rest of the country was subdued on the 13th. They celebrated on the 14th. In Shushan, they fought on the 14th as well.
Are we going to be dancing pretty?
This is not dance music. Trust me. This is not dance music. This is more seance music. We might break out into a seance. You never know what's going to be going on here. You can never know what's going on here at the hotel. The whole room. Yeah.
You should tell them, go by the cemetery. People are dying to get in there.
So he says, so then the Gemara asks, Ve'ema, therefore we say, Prozim Barba'as, or the unwalled cities on the 14th, Mukafim, those walled cities, Klalu Klalai. Maybe they don't read it all. Maybe the mitzvah was only given to people in unwalled cities. But people in walled cities, too bad, you don't have to read the Megillah. Okay? So the Gemara answers, come on, Velav Yisrael knew. Are they not Jews? Boy, wouldn't this be a real answer for today? Huh? Wouldn't this be a question for today? Are they not Jews just because they lived in a walled city? I see right away Judaism, no matter what, you get 3 Jews, you break them into groups. Right away there's Kainim, Levim, Yisraelim. Right away there's this, there's that, different tribes. Right away we try to put them into Knights of Pythias, Knights of Columbus. Don't even ask. Don't even go over there. Va'id, and also, okay, so one thing is, how could you exclude them? They're Jews. So even if you want to say, so what? There are Jews that have certain responsibilities in certain places, and Jews don't have responsibilities in different places. This won't be the first time where Jews are permitted to do something in one place and Jews are not permitted to do it in the second place. For example, could you think of something where Jews would be permitted to do something in one place but be exempt if they lived in somewhere else? Perfect. Sacrifices. Animal sacrifices could only be brought where? In Yerushalayim. You might be the most holiest guy, but if you lived in Toledo, Ohio, and you know Moshe Rabbeinu, forget about it. You're not bringing a sacrifice. Only in Yerushalayim could you bring a sacrifice. So we do have instances and cases where some geographical area was designated as a place to do the mitzvah and others not. Extend it even further. For example, all of the laws of Shemitah, the land has to lay fallow, only applies to Israel. If you live in the farm belt here in America, you don't have to worry about the laws of Shemitah. So therefore, the Gemara is asking another. Therefore, the Gemara brings another question in, even though it already has stated a good question. How could you separate between the walled and the unwalled cities? Are they not all Jews? But my retort to that would be, so what? If the Megillah would specify only unwalled cities, it would be not a problem. That's the way it goes. Sometimes you have this mitzvah, sometimes you don't have the mitzvah. It doesn't make a difference. Even though they were all Jews. We're not denying the fact that they're Jews, just that they don't have the responsibility because they don't live in villages. It would be a chiddush, it would be a new kind of a concept, but nonetheless there might be some precedent to back this up. So then the Gemara goes into a second question. So even if you say, okay, there's separation of walled and unwalled, it says the Megillah starts off, Vahi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh, hamelech mahaydu vat Kush. He was the king Achashverosh that reigned from Hodu till Kush. Now Hodu is where? Hodu is India, Kush is Ethiopia. Okay? So, we're going to have to give a discount on this one, Paul. We're going to have to either give a discount or charge a premium for the background music.
People think you scored it this way.
I'm telling you, this is you put scored by John Williams. You know.
I want to ask you: does mikveh fall into this category? Does the mikveh has to be fulfilled in a certain place, right? Has to have a certain kind of water.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
Another example of that.
Oh, yeah, they edit that out, huh? You know what we're going to do for every, well, Yoshka. Yoshka. You know, so he says, "V'oid mahaydu vat kush ksiv." It's written that the miracle happened from where? Haidu till Kush, right? The whole kingdom of where Achashverosh was under this terrible decree of killing the Jewish people. So therefore, the miracle happened to everybody. So how could you differentiate between walled and unwalled cities? If it happened for the entire country, you can't make just a separation. Okay, so he says you're right. Okay, so we know now for sure that walled cities have to read. And we also know that walled cities have to read separately from unwalled cities. Okay, I'll buy that. But now, how do you know the 14th and 15th? Let's say like this. Ve'eimon, let us say, prozim, the walled, unwalled cities, bar be'iser. Read on the 14th. Mukafim, those that are walled, since it doesn't specify, bar biser uba chamisher. They should read it on the 14th and the 15th. Twice they should read it. Because since we don't know, and since Shushan is a walled city, to read on the 15th, so what about all the other walled cities? They should read it too. The 14th and the 15th. Okay? Now, remember when we first... Only the walled cities from Joshua. So you know what, if Long Beach decides to erect a wall now around our city, it won't fall into this category. That's it. Now remember, when we first were discussing this issue, we came to the conclusion that there are some cities in Israel that have they're walled, like Akko and Tzvat, and I think we have a few others. We came to the conclusion we read, but they read on the 14th, and for those that want to be, basically cover all the bases, read on the 15th. As well, but they don't have to. But if they want to say, you know what, we really want to be super religious, so they read it on the 15th as well. So the Gemara asks a question. So let the walled cities read it both days. So he says, "Kedichsiv," as it's written, "Liyesh oisim," to make that day Yeshema ba'aser, the 14th day lechodesh Adar of the month of Adar, v'shem chamisha aser boy, and also the 15th b'chol shana, every year. Right? So, and who is this referring to? This is referring to Shushan, right? In Shushan, they had the extra day, so therefore, let it make the 14th and the 15th. So, it's a good question. So, a walled city should read the 14th and the 15th. So, he asks a question. If that was so, he would have written, Es yoimar ba'aser v'chamisha aser. See here the kvetch? Sorry to use that word. The kvetch is the pronunciation, where he emphasizes the emphasis. If this was true, that you read both the 14th and the 15th, Kosav, the Megillah would have been written as Yoimar Ba'aser, the 14th, V'chamish Aser, and the 15th. But it doesn't say that. What the Megillah says is Yoimar Ba'aser L'Chodesh Adar, the 14th day of the month of Adar, V'es Yoim Chamish Aser. It's kind of a comma between the 14th and the 15th, not the word and. See, the word and, the letter Vav, generally in Hebrew, the letter Vav is a mechuber. It connects everything. So you say Abba v'chaverov, Abba and his friends. Right? That would mean that everybody in this room is included into whatever this next statement is going to be. So if it's to say Abba v'chaverov went to the store, so the vav is a mechaber. Right? The vav includes everybody after the first statement. So if it would have been written Arba Asar, the 14th, Chamisha Asar, and the 15th, then you would say the same rules applies for the 14th and for the 15th. But the fact that the Megillah wrote, Es yoim arba asar l'chodesh Adar, Ves yoim chamisha asar l'chodesh Adar, the 14th day of the month of Adar and the 15th day of the month of Adar, shows that it was split. There's a comma to tell us that there's a differentiation between the two.
You can see that, that's correct.
Yeah. It's almost obvious.
To the casual observer.
No.
What's the difference between saying 14 בחודש אדר ו-15 בחודש אדר, or saying 14 and ו-15?
Because Arba Esrei v'Chamesh Esrei there's no separation between the two. If he wanted to show, the Megillah writers wanted to show that they're completely equal, why does he have to write it in such a language to separate them? He says the 14th day and the 15th day. Why? He should just write the 14th and the 15th. But the fact is that he wrote the word day to tell us, to teach us a lesson that there is a differentiation between the two. The reason why he stretched it out. Okay? Now, trust me, you could learn it both ways. Okay? If someone would make an argument the other way, we would say, yeah, sure, why not? You know what I'm saying? But that's why you can't leave any stone unturned in the Talmud. So he says, 15th day. Yes, you would have been right if you would have said the 14th and the 15th. Hashta now. The ksiv, as it's written, es yoimar ba'aser, v'es yoim chamisha aser. Now that it's written the 14th day and the 15th day, also es, the word es, the, uposik. It comes to tell us, he stops it. He makes a distinction, right? That's the word S. Okay? Hana arba asr. There are some that read the 14th. V'hana b'chamish asr, and these read on the 15th. Okay? Everybody following along so wrong? Right? Come to make this and that on the 14th. Okay. Then the Gemara asks another question. You think we're finished here? No. Let's go next step. Ve'ayman, let us say prozim ba'arbaiser. Let us say that the villages read on the 14th. Mukafim, those that are walled cities, those surrounded by a wall. Iboi, if they want, barbaiser. Let them read on the 14th. Iboi b'chamishaser. Or if they want, they could read on the 15th. Right? Don't forget that we're all based upon this first, that they did it on the 14th and the 15th. So why do you say they specifically have to read it on the 15th? Maybe if they like, they could read it on the 14th. If they like, they could read it on the 15th. Why do you have to stress that they read it on the 15th? Why? Give them a choice. They should have a choice to do it. Omar Kra. So the verse says, our good old friend, Bizmanehem. If you remember that word, in their proper time, in their seasons. What does it say? Bizmanehem. Zmanei shel zeh, lo zmanei shel zeh. The season for one is not the season for the other. Right? There has to be a separation. We have to know that there's a difference between villages and walled cities. If one is reading on one day, the other cannot be reading on the same day. The other has to be reading on a different day, because it says in their proper times. So if in their proper seasons, when we know that haprozim, the unwalled, the villages read when? So good. And the walled cities read on the 15th. So therefore that's the way it's gonna work. Then he says, come on. Ve'ema betleisar. Let us say that they read it on the 13th. What have to read on the 14th, the 15th? Let them go back a day. Betleisar on the 13th, because the 13th they were also celebrated. They were things. So he says, Kishushan eshkechan asiya. You have to follow what Shushan did. And what did Shushan do? When did they celebrate? It sounds like they're bringing a sacrifice. No, on the when? What did Shushan do? Shushan is the walled city did on the 15th. So since they did it on the 15th, so this whole piece of Gemara came down to one thing. Do as Shushan does. So you could have saved us a lot of aggravation and just say, do as Shushan do. No. But it wants you to think. Never leave any stone unturned. I mean, just because someone gives you an answer, don't take it for granted. Just because I tell you, because it says in the verse. If it says so in the verse, let's analyze the verse. Let's get down to the bottom of it. Because if you don't, then we're missing out on a tremendous amount of information that we could only glean from going back and forth. That's why you see many yeshivas, they have what they call the chavrusa system. Chavrusa system is pairs. They study in zugot. They study in pairs. Why in pairs? Because you know what? Because even if you study alone, even you might be the most brilliant person, there's always going to be things that you're going to fool yourself. You think you understand it, but you really don't understand. So you read something and you think, you know what, I grasped it. But you really don't grasp it until someone challenges you to see if you really understand it. So if I ask you, when do people read if Purim comes out on the 6th, on Friday, and you could rattle it off, walled cities on Sunday, and the other guys on Thursday, and then it's on Friday. And then you go back and forth, gribbling, arguing back and forth, and that's why argument is very, very, very important. Now, there's going to come a point in time when you have to say stop, because you know what, you could keep going and going and going and going, you'll never get to any kind of a conclusion. But we know that there are exercises which are beneficial, and there's exercises of futility. There were guys at my yeshiva that could never stop asking questions. These guys who used to bring a sock and put it in the mouth and tape over their mouth with some duct tape. So after a while, you just, like my teacher, I had a French teacher, God bless him, I think he passed away, Mr. Hutchison. Doesn't sound like a French guy, but there was a guy in my class sat right in front of me, and he couldn't be quiet. Every single second, another question. So finally, the teacher got exasperated. We were laughing. He says, "Don't laugh at the poor guy. He can't help himself. He can't help himself. I mean, what he didn't say is it's an illness. The poor guy's a retard. He didn't want to say that, but you know what he said? Don't laugh at him. It's not nice. But there comes a point in time when you just have to take something for granted, ultimately, because for gribble, we're never going to get anywhere. But just to sit back like this and just take the information and not challenge, That's also not right.
Takes the chametz back into the woodwork.
What?
When the mouse takes the chametz into the woodwork.
Ein ledavar saf. There's no end to this. There's no end to it. So therefore, don't take it.
Ask a question in class?
You could.
You.
I was the quietest guy. I never asked any. I never spoke. I never spoke in class. They didn't even know I was in school till I graduated. They said, "Who is this guy?" Forrest Gump. They said, "Who's this Gump guy? Who's this Gump guy?" I had a very tough time keeping quiet. I don't know. That's, they knew already who's going to be the rabbis in class. The guys that don't shut up. Then we knew who's going to be the doctors. The guys, and then, of course, there's but whatever it is. But you know what? Ein abai shel lamed. It says in the Pirkei Avos, in the ethics of our father, a shy person will never be a scholar. Because if you don't ask questions, you don't try to understand, but you're shy and you're embarrassed. And I've always felt there's no such thing as an embarrassing question. There really isn't. If you don't understand, there's no reason to go further. Stop. We'll talk about it again and we'll explain it again till we understand it. I mean, there's nothing, there's
Talk to some doctors I know.
oh no, see, doctors are different. Doctors, what? Yeah, yes. No. You, Rabbi Newman encourages questions. I've seen him teach. I've seen,
Question a doctor. Always.
yes.
Always. And I'm telling you from personal experience, you always question a doctor. You never
do, but they don't answer very well.
They can be brought to make the answer, believe me.
Yeah,
There were times
listen.
where 4 doctors are given the same.
No, listen, you know what? In halacha, in Jewish law, you go to a din Torah. Okay, I'm suing Ted right now, as a matter of fact. Okay, he sold me a diamond. I wanted a flawless diamond. He said that is a little flaw. Okay, so we're going to a din Torah now. Okay, it's not true. We're just thinking theoretically. Okay, theoretically. We go to a din Torah, and now we go to 3 rabbis, and they say, Ted's right. I have a right to say, Heicha Dantuni. I have a right to say to them, you ruled like Ted. I want to see where's your precedent. I want to see precedent. Just because you like Ted, he's a nicer guy than I am. Or he presented his case better than I presented my case. So you do have a right even to challenge anybody. They have a right to come back to you and to say to you, you know what? We'll go Hecha Dantuni, you pay him first. Pay him. Then once he gets his money, then we'll bring out the precedent. But if you're going to use it as a stalling tactic, you know what? Heicha Dantuni. And then after we show you Heicha Dantuni, where we brought precedent from, you're going to come back and you're going to say, well, that guy was a Polisher. I only go according to the Galicianer. Or that guy was a Svardi. I only go to Ashkenazi. No. Put the money in escrow. Okay? Don't give it to Ted. Put the money in escrow with a third party, and then we'll see. Then we'll see. Because you can always fool around with the legal system. Let me just give you one small piece of advice that's free, because I love you all like my own family.
Don't buy diamonds from Ted.
No. You can I'll buy your jewelry by Ted.
I actually gave a guy money back once. I didn't even remember the story. I called a friend that I hadn't seen in years, and he reminded me that once he bought something from me, he didn't have a lot of money, so I called him up. I felt bad.
You gave him the money.
I gave him money back.
But
he reminded me,
Tzaddik.
Yeah.
Tzaddik. No, buy your diamonds from Ted. But there's one occupation that you never challenge. That's waiters in a restaurant. Yeah.
That's right.
Trust me. Okay? Do not challenge waiters in a restaurant, because they handle your food. So whatever they do, whatever they bring you, always with a smile, thank you, and have a good day, and leave a tip. Yeah. Because they have long memories, and especially if you frequent that restaurant, that's just a small piece of advice, because I love you. Because I love you. Rabbis and doctors and all of these guys challenge. Never challenge a waiter. Okay, so then he says like this. Now we have 2 mitzvahs on Purim. We talked about a couple of mitzvahs on Purim, right? One mitzvah was reading the Megillah. What were some of the other mitzvahs we talked about that we have to fulfill on Purim? Shalachman is very good. One other one. There's 2 more I'm thinking about. Oh, that's a good one. You give matanos lavyonim, give geld to the poor. And there's one other one. Okay, we mentioned already all 4. All 4 were mentioned. Okay, one is reading the Megillah. Shalachman is as giving presents to each other. Matanos lavyonim, presents to the poor, gifts to the poor, and Sudas Purim, to have a special feast, which at the Purim Suda, there was a mitzvah to imbibe, or to at least elevate yourself to the point where you're so happy. I'm so happy. Right? Okay. So they're very different. They're very different kind of mitzvahs. So now we know. So now let's see what the next piece of the Gemara goes. He says like this. Eshkechon. Okay, no, he says like this. Okay, Asiya, Eshkechon Asiya. We have now established or accounted for the celebration of Purim. What's the celebration of Purim? Remind us, please. Not reading of the Megillah. The celebration of Purim would be the joy of Purim. Would be the Suda. Would be the celebration of Purim. Would be the feast, right? Because that would be the celebration. So now we know about the fact that we have to celebrate Purim. Schira minolon. How do you know in general that you have to have the recital of the Megillah? Because schira comes from the word zachor, to remember. So there's two things. Remember, you know where this comes from, the basis of this? In the Ten Commandments, right? There are 2 times that the commandments are given. Once at the Mount Sinai, which first time is in Exodus. The second time is when in Deuteronomy it's recited again. So both in either one, there's a separate mitzvah for Shabbos. One's a Shomer es Yom Shabbos L'Katrei, keep the Sabbath holy, and the other one is Zocher es Yom Shabbos L'Katrei, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy. So everyone says, okay, 1 second. One was given before, and then it was changed. So no, there's 2 different mitzvahs. There's Shomer and there's Zocher. There's one that you celebrate it with clean clothes and good food, and you do it. Then there's the remembrance, all of the prohibitions. Don't do this, don't do that, da, da, da. So there's 2 different mitzvahs. One is a positive one. So same thing is true about Purim here. There's the Asiyah, there's the celebration of Purim that we do, and then there's the Schira and the remembrance of the celebration. So how do you know that you have to remember? Maybe it's just enough what Mordechai and Esther had in mind to establish Purim was that every year we go out with a big shturim, we have a tremendous party, and at this party we put out our best silver, and that way we'll never forget. How do you know that you have to read the Megillah? Why is it so important to have to read the Megillah? Okay? So he says, Omar Kra, it says in the verse again in the Megillah, "V'hayom ma'elo niskorim v'nasim." These days shall be remembered and kept. Remembered and kept. Niskorim, from the word what? Zachor, to remember. V'nasim, and kept. So what do you have to have? What do you mean remembered and kept? What do you mean remember? If it was only to celebrate the Suda, only to celebrate the feast, it would just say, Vayomim ha'ele nasim. These are the days to be kept. What is the remembrance part? He says, Iskir schir l'asiyah. He equalizes the same for remembering as doing. Okay? It's like Shabbat. So you have mitzvahs. You have the mitzvah of remembering, which is the telling of the story and the whole thing that happened, what happened. Because what's the bottom line? Bottom line is that we celebrate our redemption from the wicked Haman, right? Do we have to go through the whole rigmarole of listening to it, the story again of Achashverosh couldn't fall asleep, the Maisa with Esther coming together? Okay, fine, just celebrate. It's enough. No, you have to remember. Where else is there such a mitzvah to remember? Pesach, right? Pesach, we have the mitzvah of reading the Haggadah. One of the mitzvahs of Pesach is literally sitting down and retelling the story of the leaving of the Exodus, the leaving of Egypt. It's a very interesting mitzvah because you know what? You have to sit there and retell the whole story over and over again. Now, by the time you hit 22 and you've read the Haggadah since you're 5 years old, the story gets a little old. I mean, we know already, the 10 plagues. So the challenge of every father and mother in America is how to keep the Seder's fresh. So usually I give a class before Pesach, 39 ways to keep the Seder interesting. Of course, I implement none of the 39 ways, but nonetheless, you know what? You have to keep it fresh. That's really why you keep reading it over and over again, because you hope that you get a new insight into it. Every time you read a Megillah and every time you listen to the story, there's something new that jumps out at you. Some little aspect that you'd never thought about before in the whole story, and then you say, you know what? It's unbelievable. The entire story is just simply simply incredible, simply unbelievable. The twists and turns, the plots that this thing has. It's amazing. It's amazing. Okay, now we're going to go into we're going to now keep going a little bit. Masnisin, our Mishnah, the loy kahai Tana does not agree with that Tana. Now, let's see if you remember something. What was the name of the authors of the Mishnah? What did they call that group? Tanoim. Beautiful. What were the authors of the Gemara? Amarayim. Beautiful. Excellent. Okay, so the Gemara says, Masnisin, our Mishnah.
What do I win? Do I win?
Yes, you do. Yeah. This UCLA. Oh, yeah, are you a UCLA fan?
Yeah.
Oh, and you came tonight.
Went to UCLA.
Oh, you went to UCLA, and they're playing tonight, and all of that. Oh, such Mesiris Nefesh. They come.
Did they lose?
UCLA. There's nobody here from Gonzaga. No. Tim's from Gonzaga. No.
Did they win UCLA?
They're playing. I don't know. They're playing as we speak. He says, "Okay, so you better study hard." Oi, please, Masnisin loy kahai Tana. Our Mishnah does not agree with that Tana. Which Tana are we talking about? Patience. Listen closely. The Tanya we learned, Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha Omer, Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Korcha, said, Krach and Hamukofin, cities that are walled, Chaimais with walls, Miyamais Shushan, from the days of Shushan, right? That's a little different than we had in our Mishnah, right? We had from Yeshua ben Nun, Mukafas Chaima, Mukafas Chaima Mimais Achashverosh, or walled cities from the days of Achashverosh, V'koirin b'chamisha asar. Read on the 15th day. Okay? That's a little... Yeah, that makes a little bit better sense than Joshua because it happened on that year. Af, also, kol shemukafas chayma, mimais Achashverosh, also those walled cities that were walled from the days of Achashverosh, koirin b'chamisha asar, should also read on the 15th day of the month. So he has a little bit different twist, a little different take than our Mishnah. Same concept, but he just changes the historical dates a little bit. Our Mishnah said from the days of Joshua. He says, Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha argues, only from the days of Achashverosh. So if you had a city, let's say like living anywhere, Tzvat, let's say, now we can prove that it was already from Yeshua, from Achashverosh's time. It would read when? On the 15th. But if it didn't have it, let's say didn't have it during King Solomon's days, but had it, let's say 100 years later, when would he read it? When would he read it? According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, if it was built 100 years after King David, when would they read it? So, when would they read it? When would they read it? The 15th. No? The 15th. Certainly they would have read it. He claims only from Achashverosh's days. So if you tell me, okay, a walled city that was, let's say, in the days of the Maccabees, only erected in the days of the Maccabees, when would they read it? According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha. Now, you have to know, did the Maccabees come before the Megillah Esther or after? The story of Hanukkah came before Purim or after Purim? What came first chronologically, Purim or Hanukkah? Think before you answer. Think about it. Think, dun, 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 dun. Okay? Okay, who says Purim came first? Raise their hands. Renee thinks that Purim came first. Who thinks Hanukkah came first? We got 2, 3, 3.5, and 4. Hanukkah. Okay, we'll go one more time. Who says first Purim? Ted, Renee. 3. Okay. Come on. Think about it.
The Maccabees came during the Greek period.
Okay.
And this was during the Babylonian captivity. So
think about this. What happened? We talked about what happened. Okay. What happened after the story of Purim? Okay. Think about this for a moment. Esther died. She had a son. Okay. We talked about this, Darius. Okay, Darius allowed the Jews to build which temple? The second temple. Came along the Maccabees and protected which temple? Was it the first temple the Maccabees lived in, or the second temple? It's the second. Okay? The Maccabees had to live in the second temple because it was the days of the Greeks. The Greeks certainly didn't come before the Babylonians came. Right? So the story of Purim came before the story of Hanukkah. Okay? Okay?
We want to win something over
Okay, they're going to win.
No, I want to ask you, the Rabbi.
Okay. No, so think about this for a moment. Okay? So before Ted gets his question in, okay? According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, according to his new statement, a city that had a wall during Achashverosh's time, when do they read it? Okay. So a city that had a wall that was built during King David's times, when do they read it? Okay. Let's establish another fact. What came first, King David or the story of Purim? Of course King David came first. He was the builder of the first base of Mikdash. Okay? So King David came before Purim. Purim came before Hanukkah. Okay? So now if I'm living in a city that had a wall established by King David, when do I read it? 15th, Charlotte. Very good. Okay. Now I have a city with a wall that was built by Judah HaMaccabee. According to Rabbi Yeshua ben Korcha, when do I read it? Yes. Hello. Okay? The thing is, the 14th, of course, because only the cutoff date was Achashverosh, the story of Purim. Any city post-Purim that built a walled city, doesn't matter. We don't care. As long as your walled city was not around in the time of the story, it doesn't make a difference. So if King Herod comes and builds a wall around the city, when do I read it? The 14th or the 15th?
50.
The when?
He comes after Purim.
Who comes first? King Herod or Purim?
Purim.
Of course. Why? Purim comes before the second temple. When does Herod live?
Built on the second.
built on top of this.
He comes at the end of the second temple era. Okay?
That was
So
part of my question. How does the temple itself, when it was rebuilt, they named it Herod's temple?
that was only renamed afterwards.
No, I know, but I mean, what did it consist of before he
There was a
empowered
temple.
them?
There was a temple. What happened was the chronological order went something like this. The Jews lived in Israel for approximately 370 years as they entered with Joshua before they built the first temple. Okay? They build the first temple, because I just want to show you what the difference chronologically is. So Joshua comes in, they live 370 years before they build the temple. King Solomon builds the temple. Okay? Okay. Then, no, maybe it was even more. I'm sorry, it was more. It was 350 just in Shiloh. Maybe it was even closer to 450 years when they lived before Joshua comes in and Solomon builds the temple. Solomon's temple lasts 410 years. So how much is that now? Let's say 450 and 410.
800 and change.
860. Okay? There's a 70-year period now. 70-year period. So 800 and what do we say? 60 plus 70 is 930. Okay? So 930 years from Joshua entering till we come back to build the second temple. Okay? So you're talking 930 years difference between these two opinions, because Joshua comes in and he comes out of here. Then they built the second temple. I'm giving you just rough numbers, obviously. It lasts 420 years. So it's coming in from Joshua 930 and 420, so that would be 930, 50, so that would be 1450, right? 9 and 4, 1350. So you're talking about 1,350 years that the Jews kind of were dominant in Israel. After that, once the second temple was destroyed, now Herod became only in the latter part, because we know more about Herod really from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, than we do from the Old Testament. We know that he came in and then persecuted and all of these things. There's a lot of stuff written about Herod from Josephus, thank you, etc., etc. But he built on top of what existed. Now you understand that the first temple was built by King Solomon at the height of Jewish power. I mean, this was a temple like no other temple. I mean, gold and silver. He had the most beautiful. They said he had a He had a magnificent throne that had all different animals carved out as he stepped up. And not that you have to step on the first step, it would elevate to the second step. And the first step, he had like faces of eagles carved out on the sides. Then it would elevate him to the second step that was faces of lions, and then it would elevate him automatically to the third step in. And and this an ox he had carved out and elevated him to the fourth, and then he sat down on his gold. So you can imagine the throne was just of an unbelievable proportion. So that
Surrounded by hot babes.
well, I can't say I'm being yes. Well, I agree with Tim says. Yeah, but you know what? And it was unbelievable. So he spared. He absolutely left no expense spared. He went wild. The Jews come back from the Babylonian exile. They had nothing. They were poor people. Ezra, and all these people, they had nothing. They came back from an exile. They barely built a temple. It was wood, where he used gold and silver. They used gold. They used wood, plastic. No plastic. It wasn't around it. Other things. So when Herod came along, he said, "Shande, I'm King Herod. This is going to be my temple." So then he rebuilt it into something magnificent called Herod's temple. Unfortunately.
That temple was built. It's a beautiful passage about the people who remembered the first temple.
Yes.
Were mourning while the people
Well,
who didn't remember were cheering.
Exactly. It's an interesting question that you bring up, because Herod falls into this gray area. Herod was what we call an Idumean. He came from the tribe of Idumea. Idumeans converted to Judaism. His father, Antipater, his father was not by force or not by so much by force, rather than they were rooting for the winner. See, when you root for a winner and you convert, the rabbis are always a little suspicious of why you converted. Did you convert because you love Judaism so much, or did you convert because, hey, look at this, they're winning? So it was always a question on the Idumeans whether they converted really, or whether, hey, you know what, Jews won the Super Bowl in 216 BC. They figured, hey, why not? We'll join them. So when he became king, he was considered Jewish. He was the king of the Jews, Herod. But there was always this little kind of issue, whether it was real or whether it was not real, but very few people said it to his face.
But didn't he have to have a lineage to King David in order to?
No, because that lineage had already ended that lineage ended at the first temple.
Okay.
That was it. There was no more kings anymore after the first temple. What happened later on is when the Maccabees took over, the Maccabees appointed themselves kings as well, which really angered the rabbis, because there was supposed to be a separation of duties. Kings were supposed to come from King David. Priests were supposed to come from Aaron. They were priests. The Maccabees were Kohanim, but they forged together these two offices, which would cause a lot of politics and rift within Israel itself. But by the time he came along, king didn't really mean king of Israel in the same sense like biblical kings. He just Rome appointed him king. And he had and the reason is because he had a tremendous father who was very, very politically, what's the word they use? Sly. He was a Karl Rove, let's call it that way. He was a Karl Rove of those years. Astute, politically astute. He always knew when the wind was blowing, because allegiances changed at that time in those periods so often. You never knew who's on top and who's on the bottom, because in Israel itself there were civil wars that were being fought among brothers of the Hashmonaim. Aristobulus was fighting against John Hyrcanus. We don't know if you're on John's side, if you're Aristobulus' side, who called in the Romans. The Romans came. That's why they always said, during the Cold War, the State Department always said, they used to have a statement, you never invite a bear for lunch. You know why? Because he stays for supper. Okay? That's how they viewed the Soviet Union. If you think you invite the Soviet Union in for some advisors and just going to ask them to leave at the end, it wasn't going to happen. The Soviet Union is there to stay. The same thing was true about the Romans. When you invite the Romans into Judea, thinking that they're going to back you, and then all of a sudden you're going to say, thank you very much, and we'd like you to go back to Rome, you're dreaming. That never happened that way. So Antipater was able to maneuver these political waters, knowing exactly whose side to be on. When this guy lost, he immediately changed allegiances. He had no compunctions about doing that. And his son Herod eventually became the king and built up the base of Israel. But he was a crazy person. I mean, on one hand, he was a tremendous builder. I mean, a lot of the things you see in Israel today, he built Roman and Greek amphitheaters in Caesarea and all along the coast. These tremendous things, Caesarea and all of these things he built up. At the same time, he was a megalomaniac that killed his whole Sanhedrin. In one swoop, he wiped out the entire Sanhedrin and appointed his own guys. The one guy he never tangled with was Hillel. Hillel was the head of Sanhedrin around his time. He never tangled with Hillel. It was too popular. He also knew how to play the game. You could beat up on some guys, but you had to lay off on other guys, on untouchables. But that was an interesting period in Jewish history because you never knew exactly, who was on what side. Even during the destruction of the Second Temple, to take it one step even further, which is 70 years really after Herod's reign, in Jerusalem itself there was 7 or 8 Jewish political parties. Even while under siege of the Romans, they couldn't get together.
When Titus came through the wall, there were 4 separate groups all fighting
Each other. Yeah, exactly. You know what? This guy didn't like this guy liked to daven this guy liked to daven Shachris with this accent. It was, it never changes. It never changes. You think about this. Think about this sad statement. During the siege of Jerusalem, the Talmud tells us, the Jews had enough oil, wood, and provisions to last for 20 years. They could have sat easily and outlasted the Romans for 20 years. They had enough provisions in Jerusalem. Till the Zealots burned the storage houses down. They burned them all down. That was it. End of all the provisions. And why did they burn them down? Because they wanted to fight. They said, do you think we're going to sit here and just going to take it like this? No. We're going to burn them down and we're going to cause a civil war to happen.
Nothing changed. There is elections now.
Yeah, and elections are Tuesday, right?
Yeah.
Tuesday's elections. Thank God, I'm saying this, thank God for the outside threat that Israel faces. For it were not for the outside threat, they would eat each other alive. Forget about it.
It wouldn't have been a state if they would have left it up to the people fighting when,
They're going, the Haganah, the Stern Gang. Oh, don't ask. The Palmach, with this, with that, who are you, what are you, who are we, who are this, anyways, that's why.
We're worried about the
Tar.
14th and 15th.
Exactly, and we're worried about the 14th and 15th.
I'll write Stephen an email and ask him when he read Megillah on the 14th.
Oh, yeah, that would be good. That would be good.
Please cite the source.
Oh, that would be good. So he says, okay, so back here, so he says, so we know that Rabbi Yeshua ben Korchok, back to our discussion, that he argues that it's not from the time of Joshua, but it's at the time of Achashverosh. Okay?
That came before Hanukkah.
Okay, you have to remember that. V'tana didan ma taima yalif proze. Our Mishnah, our Tana, right? Who in the back of in our Mishnah, who says it's from Yeshua ben Nun. He draws an analogy of the words proze, villagers. What does he mean by that? Ksiv hacha, it's written here, al kain, therefore, hayehudim haprozim, the Jews that lived in the villages, uksiv hasam, and it's written there. Where is the there? This is important. The there is in Deuteronomy. Now what came first? The saying of Deuteronomy or Joshua's entrance into the land of Israel? What came first? Deuteronomy or Joshua's entrance into the land of Israel? Of course it has to be Deuteronomy, right? Deuteronomy is part of the Torah, right? It comes from Moses. Moses came before Joshua, okay? So therefore Deuteronomy always comes before Joshua's entrance. So where does he bring a proof from? From Deuteronomy. Oh, he says, Levad me'orei haprozi harbe ma'oid. Besides the unwalled towns, a great many, right? Some cities one way and some another, which are going to be conquered. He's talking about being conquered. So some cities one way, some cities another way, and he refers to unwalled cities. So our Tana Our author, the one in our Mishnah, reads the word in the Megillah, unwalled cities, and he reads the words in the Torah, unwalled cities, and what does he come to the conclusion? That it's got to be talking about the same period. And and what period was the unwalled cities in Deuteronomy? Who lived shortly afterwards? Who led the Jews into Israel? There you go. So Yeshua that's why our Tana, that's why the author of our Mishnah argues that it has to be walled cities from Joshua's times. Because already in the Torah it already makes reference to unwalled cities. So it makes sense that Joshua is the cutoff point.
So they stuck a knot in here? Is that permissible in Talmud to stick a word in to make it agree?
What do you mean? Which word?
Apparently this word not, the reference to towns were not walled in the days of Joshua. And the footnote says the word not is not in the text of the original here.
Which text are you talking about?
C1. C, little C in the margin.
C1.
The footnote, first footnote.
The word not was not in the original text, but it is necessary for the sense. Rashi greatly simplifies it by reading, just as there the villages were such from the days of Joshua. So here the village must have been from the days of Joshua. So he says, let me just go back here to 1. No, we haven't gotten to there yet. We haven't gotten there yet. Because we say here, Malahalon, we haven't gotten. Malahalon mukafis chayim meis ben Yeshua ben Nun. Avkam mukafis chayim meis ben Yeshua ben Nun. Just like there, they were walled from the times of Yeshua ben Nun, so to here they were walled in this. Okay, so now he says like this. It's a good question. If you look in the Hebrew text, okay? If you look in the Hebrew text, I want to show you something. If only I could see it, it's so small. Not Rashi, but I'm going to show you here. Hagoyes Hagra. There was a great scholar. Too bad Bob Weiner's not here this evening because he's a Litvak, and the Gra is a Litvak. So there is, if you notice, if you just follow on just a little bit, you don't have to be able to read the Hebrew. But go on the left-hand side, then, if you see over here, Hagoyes Hagra. Look, I just want to point out over here. If you see over here, you see Hagoyes Hagra? Look at the middle of the page. You see a little aleph there? In middle of the page, in the text of the Talmud. In the text of the Talmud, Tim, here, right here. You see right here, this aleph? Okay. That's what it's referring to. So he says, Ma'ala halon, mukafes chaimim b'mais ben Shua, just like there that they were walled. So what does the Gra say? Gemara mukafes chaima, right? Not the not walled, but it should say the walled cities. What is he referring to? What is the Gra saying? The Vilna Gaon, that there were texts that he studied that had both. That it said, and sometimes it said those that were not walled, and sometimes it says those that were walled. He's arguing it should say those that were walled from Yeshua ben Nun, which often happens because what happened was, don't forget that the text itself before 1450, how was it transmitted? Written. It had to be written. 1450, Gutenberg discovered the printing press, right? Johann Gutenberg, so it had to be written. So after great scholars, 2,500 pages of writing, there's going to be several discrepancies. The discrepancies really had nothing to do to the meaning of the text itself, because we both know the meaning of this text means that it's from the days of Joshua, but therefore guys like the Gra and the Bach and others came to what they called correct the text and make it compatible with all the other texts. So it's not an uncommon thing to see a word, to see an argument between Bach and something like that. This is not the Torah, don't forget. Right. See, if you had this in the Torah, it's a big problem. When you open up the Torah and you see the little words, the Gra at the bottom of your Sefer Torah, no good. That's a problem. But in the Talmud, there's often words or phrases that there were differences in. Don't forget, there was arguments. I mean, there was excommunications that took place between printers of the text. Sure, the first. I went last summer. I never told you. I never shared this with you. Yes, last summer, me and Chani went to New York. We spent about a week in New York. We went to this unbelievable a museum called the Jewish Historical Museum down on West 15th or West 16th Street down in New York. It was unbelievable. And they were having this what do you call it when they have in the museum? They have this exhibition. Thank you. They had this wonderful exhibition on the Talmud. Everything you want to know about the Talmud. Everything from the beginning when it was first printed, and there's so many unbelievable stories. I can't remember the names of the players, but it was during the early times, maybe in the middle of the 16th century. And I think there was a printing press was only around for 100 years. There really was 2 Jewish printing presses. Sansino was the first Jewish printing press. There was another one. Both printed the Talmud. So what do good Jews do if 2 printed? What do? You sue. No, this guy sues this guy sues that guy. So one printing press went to the leading rabbis of that year, and the rabbis agreed with them. I think this was the printing press probably somewhere. There was in Italy versus maybe one in Germany. So the German one went to the leading rabbis of the day, and the rabbis agreed that the German printing press, that's the official printing press, and the Italian printing press has no right to print it. Okay. So if you're an Italian printing press guy and you just read this letter that came from the leading rabbis of the day, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? So there's a few avenues that you could do. One is you accept the ruling and stop printing.
Sell Bibles to the Goyim.
What? Or you could sell Bibles to the Goyim, but here's where you go. Who would be a greater authority in the leading rabbis of the day? And you're living in, I'll give you a hint, Italy. Yes, thank you very much. So they go to the Pope and they figure if there's someone that has greater clout than all the rabbis in Europe together, it's got to be who? That's it. Because who controlled the printing presses in those days? This was already, the Reformation was starting, but it was still that the Catholic Church early on in the development of printing presses. So he went to the Pope, and the Pope put out this statement that only the Italian printing press is the legal one. That's it. Guess who stayed? Guess who? Which one lasted? The Italian or the German? Of course. What do you think? No one was going to start up in the middle of the 16th century with the Pope. No one was going to start up with him. So that's how that was part. I mean, when I read that was like, oh my gosh, that's chutzpah. That's chutzpah. That's chutzpah. Yeah, that is chutzpah. That is chutzpah. But what happened was then both printing presses passed on. Okay, jump 200 years later. So now we're talking about where scholarship no more is anymore in Italy or in Germany now, but scholarship has moved now to Eastern Europe, to Russia and to Lithuania and to Poland. Boom! 2 printing presses pop up. One in Vilna and one in Russia. So the guy in Russia runs to the leading authorities in Russia, which were mostly Hasidim. And they vote, yes, you are the good one and you are the real one. Comes along the guy in Vilna and runs to all of the Litvisha, the opponents of the Hasidim. And they write, no. This time, the Vilners won out. So the official printing presses, if you look, it doesn't have it online, but if you look down, if I remember, on the text itself, the first page, it will tell you who did it. And there's this family, Ram, R-A-M, that became the official text, and because it also was important who got on the page. I mean, Rashi is on, Tosfos is on, a few others are on. I mean, so it was important of how you laid out the text of the Talmud itself, just like on the front page of a newspaper, right? You get a front page story, it's a story. If you get A17, no one's going to know about you. So that's how the development of the text happened. It was a most incredible exhibit, to it. And that's so therefore these people like the Bach and the Gra went through different texts and went through different originals, and they came. So even though it might have been that the accepted version was Miyamais and it should have said Loi, so that's why you have the annotations of the Gra to tell you exactly what you should be looking for. I mean, it's a fantastic study of how these developed. Now you have to understand the great scholarship of someone like the Gra. You have to literally know, because you know what, they tell a story. My father told me the story. Probably never happened, but it's a good story to tell. What happened once? The Gra, he himself, the Vilna Gaon, who was, according to everybody, a genius of geniuses. I mean, brilliant not only in the study of Talmud, but he knew astronomy and he knew philosophy and he knew mathematics. He was just an all-around brilliant guy, somewhere in the realm of Maimonides. Okay? That's why he called him a Gaon. That's why he was the genius of all geniuses. So he wanted to kind of he lived a very comfortable life. So he wanted to experience hardship. He felt in his own life, if he experiences hardship, it's going to help him in his service to fellow man. So what he did was one night he slipped out of town, and he dressed himself as a commoner, and he went to where people wouldn't recognize him, and he slept on wooden floors and this. And wherever he went, he took a stack of books with him he would be able to read, and he slept wherever people would give him provisions. Now this is for the Vilna Gaon. This is real humility. Real humility. So one day he ends up in this house of this farmer who was the most ignorant person of all. I mean, really a guy that hardly knew anything. But he had a son-in-law who, quote unquote, kivayachal knew how to learn, was kind of a scholar. And the Vilna Gaon is laying down in the middle of the night. He's laying because he upon the hospitality of the farmer, and he's laying there, but he's really studying the text. And the son-in-law is studying at night, and he wakes up in the middle of the night and he screams to his father-in-law, Dad, bring me a knife, get me a knife. He says, get you a knife, what do you need? He says, I just read a piece of the text that the Vilna Gaon emanated, and it's all wrong. And the Vilna Gaon is laying right there, and he's screaming, it's all wrong, I want to scratch it out. So the father-in-law is so proud of his son-in-law. Whoa, look at this. He's going to scratch out an emendation of the Vilna Gaon. So he brings him his big butcher knife where the guy is going to make some repairs. So the Gaon gets up and he tells him in Yiddish. I'll say it in Yiddish and then we'll translate it. Bacher, as me weiß nicht, kratzt me nicht. Which basically means, young man, if you don't know, don't scratch. Okay? Basically, he says, read over the text and you will see that the Vilna Gaon is not so wrong. And he taught him that piece. Of course, the guy, you're talking about the Vilna Gaon, and this so-called scholar was like nothing. Forget about it. It wasn't even the things. But he was such a brilliant guy. He knew the whole text of the Talmud, like we would know the blessing al Natilas Yadayim. That's once his student came to him once and complained, Reb Chaim Volozhiner, who was also himself a great scholar, and complained to him and said, you know what, Rebbe, I've studied the tractate of Sukkos 40 times and I still haven't grasped it. He says, so what, I've studied it 400 times, I haven't grasped it. So, he went through 400 times, and he wasn't a man of hyperbole, just throwing it out. Very possible he studied it 400 times already in his lifetime. That's the kind of genius, and that's why we trust him. Otherwise, if it said they're Perelmuter, krats, then you could scratch. But the girl, don't scratch.
Never can be sure about that.
What about scratching?
But he said, don't scratch me.
Don't scratch.
Scratch me.
Yeah, scratch me. Don't scratch. So he
Don't scratch me.
So he says.
If you don't know, don't scratch
No,
me.
he can also. No, you don't know. But it's different. But I tell you, ad kedei kach, how great the Vilna Gaon was, even though he was a bitter opponent to Hasidim and a bitter opponent to our Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, to the point that when the Alter Rebbe came to Vilna, he wouldn't see him. He refused to give him an appointment because the Alter Rebbe later claimed, if I was able to sit down with Rebbe Elijah of Vilna, I would have smoothed things out. I would have shown him that we're not heretics, we're not against the Torah, that the Baal Shem Tov's everything he taught was within the boundaries. He wouldn't see him. Even he didn't see him, and he excommunicated the Hasidim. The Alter Rebbe wrote a long letter praising him and called him, not only did he call him a makubal, he called him somebody that was seeped in the study of Kabbalah, which was like calling, him, how could you call him a makubal? He fought against, a makubal, someone steeped in the study of Kabbalah. He knew Kabbalah well. Sar Shel Torah. He called him not only the minister of Torah, because he understood that this guy is a great guy, but they also figured between themselves they called him naive. Not politically astute. He was no Antipater. Let's put it that way. He was a great scholar, but in the political winds, he wasn't that thing. But why did we even bring this up? Oh, because of Tim's because of the knot, just to show you that in the text itself you're gonna run into differences within the text, and that's why we have these emendations. Like Rabbi Ben Hananel down here, he has a different textual. So it's all different texts. Okay, let's go a little bit further. Let's at least finish to there. So where are we here? Okay, so he says, just like there was in the days of Yeshua ben Nun, now also we have in the days of Yeshua. He says, now I can understand why Yeshua. I understand the reasoning of Rabbi Yeshua, the son of Karcha, Lo Yomer Ketana Didan, who doesn't learn like our author of our Mishnah, the less like Prizzy. Because he doesn't learn his whole, he doesn't read, except the analogy of one village to another village. Come on, one is in the Megillah, one is in Deuteronomy, what do I have to buy this for? Ela Tana Didan, but our Tana, Matama Lo Yomer Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, why does he not agree with Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha? It makes more sense to say from the times of Achashverosh. Why Yeshua ben Nun? It doesn't make any sense. Matama, the ha Islay Prizzy. Why do you ask? Because he does like the analogy. You ask why he doesn't like the analogy. He likes it. What are you asking me a question? Hachi kamar elo Shushan the Ovid Kaman. Now the Gemara asks, what did Shushan do? The town of Shushan itself, did it read it on the 14th or did it read it on the 15th? No. Because it says celebrated both days. Both the 14th and the 15th. Like a prosem v'loy mukafim. Maybe it didn't do it not like the walled cities and not like the villages. We don't know. Amar Rava, v'amrilei, Kadi, Rava said, and others said, Kadi said, Shani Shushan is different, hoyo v'nasa bones. Because there was a miracle done on that day in Shushan, that's why he did it on the 15th. Because could be that Shushan itself maybe didn't have a walled, maybe it wasn't walled, so Shushan does it like on that day itself.
You said something earlier too about the war still going on, or there was still fighting going on.
Right. They did not rest till the 15th. In Shushan itself. That's why in Shushan they did it on the 15th, even though it might have not been a walled city from the days of Yeshua ben Nun. So therefore, why do you do it on the thing? And if you see over here, okay, forget about it. It's going to just mix us up even more. Okay, then it goes back and forth. You know what? We'll leave it over here for tonight. We got tonight because the next little piece you could read yourself. Now the question is going to be: should we meet next week or should we not meet next week? Who votes yes? Okay, so we'll meet last week. We'll do next week. One more week. Hopefully next week we have a nice little piece. It changes completely. It changes topics completely. I think it's going to be very interesting next week. It's going to talk about the alphabet and about different. Yeah, it's going to be good. It's going to be a little bit different about history. It's good. All right. Next week we meet again. Oh, thank God! I thought for a minute I'm going to have to clean next week for Pesach. Got out of it. Okay.